Welcome, everybody. I am Delia Clark, and I'm a place-based education consultant working with the Iditarod Historic Trail Alliance in partnership with the Chugach National Forest, BLM Campbell Creek Science Center, and the Anchorage Park Foundation. In normal years, we offer the iTrek program as an 11-day in-person teacher professional learning program spread across a year. We meet for a week usually in the Anchorage area, and then a few days in Seward in the fall, and then a few days usually in Nome, if we can pull it off, in the spring. Um, we encourage teachers to think about how they can connect to place, bring their students outside more, bring outside resources into the classroom, and how they can connect with the Iditarod Trail and the Alaskan cultural and natural landscape. During the pandemic, we're offering some of the core elements of iTrek as a webinar series to continue to serve Alaska educators in ways that we hope are valuable to you. We hope you're able to use the information you get today to encourage your kids to get outside and know more about the nature and culture of Alaska. We'll be offering this series throughout the school year, and we hope you're able to attend more sessions. If you're interested in receiving one UAA credit for participating in this series, or to get a flyer listing the full series, please contact us at itrekalaska@gmail.com, and I'll be sharing that email address a little later in the presentation. Before we begin, if you could mute your audio if you're not speaking, and if possible, turn on your video because it's nice to see everybody's faces. I think that helps us with communication, although you might not have the bandwidth. You can use the chat feature to ask questions or share ideas with the group, and you can raise your hand visibly as long as our numbers stay low, or if need be, you can use the raised hand feature in the toolbar on the bottom if you want to ask questions out loud. And just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded for teachers who are not able to be here today. Today, I'm going to be talking about place-based service learning, PBSL. I want to go over its goals, its principles, and I like to call them promising practices, and show you some examples of place-based service learning from Alaska and from other parts of the United States, and think about application to your classroom. I want to first talk about the term place-based service learning. You might be familiar with place-based education, service learning, environmental education, education for sustainability. They're all in that same family of ideas. What we like to think of place-based service learning as being an idea that, or an approach that pulls in the best of all of these others. Service learning, as you know, helps provide service to the community. Education for sustainability, or EFS, is what this work would be called if you were in other parts of the world. Or ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, it's something that's being used in other places. Our thinking around place-based service learning in the iTrek program is that we're talking about learning that's grounded in the particular geography, culture, and values of a community. So it brings community resources into the school and gets students out into the community. And that's what we mean by place-based. It's that connection to place. The service learning part is that students design and carry out a service project that meets the school's educational objectives. So it's the idea that they're not just doing a service project like picking up litter, and it's not connected to what they're learning, but they're doing a service project that enhances their own learning, and as well as doing something that's a valuable service in the community. So place-based service learning is that sweet spot, the mandorla, or the center of the Venn diagram, where students learn through active participation in a thoughtfully organized project that's conducted in and meets the needs of a community while also meeting the students' educational objectives. So that's what we're talking about when we're together here today. Before we go on, I would just like to conduct a poll to see what your experience is with this. So for the people who are here, if you could take a stab at answering this poll as you think you and the teachers you work with would answer it. I see that maybe One more person could answer the poll. Okay, I'm going to end the poll, and here's where we are. I'll share the results. It looks as though we've got a mixture of people who are beginning to explore the approach and want to learn more, or aren't familiar with what we're talking about at all. So that's good. That's exactly where I was going to pitch today's presentation. So that's great. And for those of you who do take your kids outdoors and into the community regularly and bring community issues and opportunities into your teaching, you can help me. Feel free to share your own ideas as we go. Um, Oopsie, what have I done? Just a moment. I pushed the wrong button. Sorry about that. Um, so I wanted to talk about 3 goals of place-based service learning. And I think of these goals as feeding 3 birds with the same seed. So place-based service learning can accomplish all 3 of these things. The first is student achievement, and you probably see that as being at the center of the work that you're trying to do. High performance and basic skills, problem solving and teamwork skills, lifelong learning, and a lifelong commitment to volunteer service and stewardship. That's at the heart of what teachers do. I'm going to be trying to make the case that you can do that better by accomplishing some of these other goals as well. I'll first just point out, if you haven't seen this exhibit up at Denali, it's a pretty cool wolf skeleton that was made in a place-based service learning project around 15 years ago by students and parents at the Cantwell School. So they prepared something, learned all about it, and then the service is that the wolf skeleton has been exhibited at the park for visitors from all around the world. Um, a second goal of place-based service learning is environmental quality. And I know that you might not think of that as part of your job as a teacher. Why should I be having to save the earth at the same time that I'm trying to educate my students? But I think that when you work on environmental quality projects that are real, that are addressing authentic issues, your students can tell and they get more excited. So it actually enhances their learning to be engaged in these real projects, projects that might accomplish sustainable practices, make for a healthy local environment, and even things that begin to have a larger impact. When students, for example, start an anti-idling campaign for school buses outside their school, that helps with air quality inside the school, and it helps with the larger issues of air quality and climate change that we're all facing and we're seeing the consequences of now. So a small local actions can make a big difference in larger actions as well. The third goal, and the third hungry bird that we're trying to feed with this seed, is community vitality. There have been so many studies that have shown that when there are strong, vibrant partnerships between schools, municipal government, community organizations, that creates a healthy local community in which more people thrive. There are lower teen pregnancy rates, there are lower governmental corruption rates, there are higher high school graduation rates. It's almost like a silver bullet that when you have those strong community connections where neighbors know neighbors, neighbors help neighbors, it ends some of the polarization that we're finding politically at the national level. At the local level, we can just work together toward things we believe in. Also works strongly to help with social equity, diversity and inclusion kinds of initiatives, economic health. Strong local economy happens when you've got people working together better. So it's community vitality has been proven to be something that we can all work on at the local level. It can make a really big difference. Place-based service learning, the scope is broader than I think traditional environmental education. Traditional environmental education people thought of as being about the natural environment, natural science and geography, and as people began to think about environmental education in a broader way, they began to look at things like history, heritage, the arts, politics, social issues, all of those kinds of things. And place-based service learning tries to look at them all together in a comprehensive way and an integrated way, so that what kids are learning about is tied in across the disciplines and tied into different parts of the community. It's also developmentally appropriate. So if you think about the child's world expanding, then the curriculum needs to expand at the same time. So when you're a preschool kid, you're very focused on what you can see and touch right where you live. And but as you get to be around fourth, fifth grade, you can begin to think more like a watershed level, a statewide level. As you get to be thinking at the more like high school level, you can start to think at a national level and even a global level. So if you're talking to elementary school kids, it makes a lot more sense to talk about the trees and squirrels or things that are right at, where they live. But once they are at the high school level, they can begin to think about the interconnectedness and even do studies that connect the rest of the world, the Galapagos, for example, or Antarctica, with issues that they can find right at home. There's been a lot of research about place-based service learning. And, at first, when we were conducting this research, we were really excited because we were seeing some anecdotal, really positive trends. We were finding that a lot of the communities where we were doing place-based service learning programs in New England were reporting strong positive outcomes, really high test results, a lot of parental involvement in the school, that kind of thing. But we felt as though we needed to have evidence. And so we carried out over 10 years a lot of pretty rigorous research that was pretty well funded. And this is what we found out, that we might not be able to claim that grades are up or test scores are up because of this work, because you can't say what caused it. It might have been that there was a Head Start program that year or something else that made the grades go up. But we can definitively say that place-based service learning energizes teachers. It makes them a lot more excited about touching the roots of what made them want to be teachers in the first place. It can transform school culture, creating a stronger relationship with parents and across disciplines and with special teachers, so that it can pull and different grade levels oftentimes are working more collaboratively when there's place-based service learning, and it helps students learn. Particularly, it's been shown to make a very big difference in students who have special needs, and students who might struggle in one area or another often can get pulled along because they're so fascinated by the work that's going on in the community. It also connects schools and communities as you pull in parent volunteers and different organizations, trail clubs, and all that kind of thing. It encourages students to become lifelong environmental stewards as they care about their local park. They get more interested in caring about all of the natural and cultural world around them, and it invites them to become active citizens, which they can grow into more and more as they get older. It's important to note that place-based service learning isn't just a one-time field trip. It's not a thing you do once. It's not a unit. It's not a guest speaker. What I want to show you is some examples of all the things that it can be. So I'm going to invite my colleague, Louisa Wolfline, to tell us a story, to share an example of something that happened in Girdwood. Louisa.
Thanks, Delia. Can you see me? Okay.
There you are.
Okay. Sorry. Great. So yes, I wanted to share about Bear Aware Girdwood. About 8 or 9 years ago, there were two teachers, a first grade teacher and a second grade teacher, participating in the Iditarod Trail to Every Classroom program, who were both from Girdwood. And for those who don't know, Girdwood is a small town, about a 45-minute drive southeast of Anchorage. It's part of the municipality of Anchorage, but it is about 45 minutes away from downtown. It's ringed by mountains and surrounded by Chugach National Forest. The teachers were looking around Girdwood for opportunities for their students. And they realized that Girdwood had a bear people problem. and that this might be something that their students could help address. Uh, Meanwhile, members of the education group of the Anchorage Bear Committee, which is a multi-agency and multi-organization group working to reduce human-bear conflicts in the city, had identified Girdwood as a part of town where they might be able to make an impact with messaging. It was a place with a lot of human bear interactions. It was pretty self-contained, and the thinking was that lessons learned there could maybe be applied to other parts of the municipality. And all they needed was a teacher willing to work with them. Well, the teachers shared their desire to focus on bears at an iTrek workshop, and coincidentally, there were a couple members of the Anchorage Bear Committee there listening. So as you can imagine, they were really excited to work with and help support the teachers. The teachers, with support of the Anchorage Bear Committee, worked together with all their students to organize a multifaceted community information campaign to raise awareness about bears and the things that people could do to minimize human-bear conflicts. All of the students learned about bear natural history, the seasonal movements of bears, what brought the bears to town, and how people could change their behaviors to reduce the chances bears would get in trouble. So the third graders wrote poems and drew pictures and other artwork to accompany the key messages they crafted. They also developed cards to hang on people's doors with those messages and artwork. And the first graders teamed up with the local radio station to write public service announcements about bear safety. So they took those key messages and made PSAs, and staff at the radio station helped them develop and record the messages. And then those messages aired on the local station all bear season long that following summer. The first and third graders also worked together to host a kickoff community event to help raise awareness, and they shared their artwork, their poems, and they performed some of their PSAs. So Delia, I think you have one of those PSAs queued up that you could play for us.
Yep.
I live in Girdwood Forest with a cub behind my knee. I'm looking for some dinner for my little one and me. We'll forage for some berries, chow down some tasty fish. In the bottom of a garbage can will I find a tempting dish. Oh, please, Girdwood, don't tempt me with your trash. 'Cause if my cubs will get a meal, they'll keep on coming back. Let's keep bears wild and people safe. Store your garbage responsibly. For more information, visit www.alaskabears.alaska.gov. Sponsored by Wild and the Wild Girdwood. Miss Stinson's first grade class in KUL 80.9 Girdwood.
Yay! Thanks, Delia. I will say too that the that became an annual event, and the teachers worked every year for I don't know, maybe 5 years doing this effort, and then there were actually some adults that started getting in on the act too to help promote it when the teachers moved on to directing their students to other place-based service learning projects.
Great. Thanks a lot. That's a really good example, and it gives an idea of what we mean. So what I'd like to do now is talk about the 6 aspirational principles of place-based service learning. We use the word aspirational because we aspire to them. Not every project you ever do is going to have all 6 of these going on in it, but they're all things that we would hope we might see included in our place-based service learning efforts. So the first is the idea that the work is grounded in place. it's connected to the community and home. It's locally relevant. It has local culture. It has local landscapes. It makes sense in terms of what you're doing. This book was made by third grade students in at a school in New Hampshire, and they made it as a to go in the welcome wagon, so that when new people moved to town, they would be able to learn about the Girdwood Town Forest. The town forest was a point of pride for the whole community, and they had K through 12 learning experiences going on in the town forest. So they wrote this book with the help of an artist in residence. And these are some of the authors who were very proud of the book. And it went through, last I knew, something like 7 printings. It's a real beautifully illustrated little story about what goes on in the forest. So an example of kids really learning and caring about their particular place. The second aspirational principle of place-based service learning is that it's real. When you focus on issues, you're not looking at orange goop coming out of a pipe somewhere in New Jersey in a textbook. You're learning about real issues that really matter in the community that you live in. An example for me of this is in Pennsylvania. These some students, 5th grade students, had been part of a readathon where they were challenged to read a whole bunch of books. And if they all managed to read the certain number of books, their teacher had promised them a hike up to this very popular lookout where they could look out across the whole valley. So they did that, and they got up to the valley, and what they found is this horrible graffiti. Or got up to the lookout, I'm sorry. They found this horrible graffiti all over the rocks. And the students were really upset about it. They'd been really looking forward to this, and the teacher didn't even notice it really because she'd been there before and the graffiti's always there. But the students were upset about it, and she saw a teachable moment, and so she invited them to think about what they could do. And the students did a lot of research and to discover a way that they could remove the graffiti from the rocks. And most of the solutions that they found were either too toxic or too labor intensive or whatever. But they found one product online that called elephant snot that was not toxic and that would work to remove paint from rocks, but it required a lot of water. And so the students set about convincing local adults in their trail maintaining club and their parents and others to join together with them in removing the paint from the rocks. And that meant that they had to carry a lot of gallons of water up this trail. They set up sort of a relay. As you probably know, I think a gallon of water weighs 10 pounds. They did all that math, and they figured out how much they had to get up there and who was going to help do it. They had gloves and brushes and things donated by the local hardware store. So it became a real community initiative initiated by the kids, who then went on to write an anti-graffiti song, and they even held an anti-graffiti festival at their school. So, one little idea that grew and grew. A third aspirational principle of place-based learning is the idea that it's empowering, meaning that students have authentic voice in making decisions about what's going to happen. So it doesn't mean they're choosing the whole thing, but it means that you, in the Bear Aware example, you would say to them, let's talk to your parents and find out what would be more influential to them, a door knocker card or a PSA on the radio. And so the kids could come in and say, we'd like to do the radio spot. They have some kind of authentic, actual decision-making power in making these decisions. I wanted to share with you this example of a trail that led from a residential area down to the village by a river, and the trail had been eroded and destroyed by a lot of mountain bike use. And so these kids decided that they cared about that, and that they were going to install steps in the trail, and they worked with the local government to haul rock from the quarry up to the top of the trail, lower it down on these sledges that you can see that were designed. It was a competitive design by the students to figure out how to do it. They had a lot of local people chip in time, and And students were so committed to getting this project done that some of them even skipped senior skip day so that they could be there on the important day that they were putting in the big rocks to make it happen. They had that much investment in a successful outcome. Fourth aspirational principle of place-based service learning is the idea of collaborative, that the school is working with community organizations. They might be Boy and Girl Scouts. They might be, as I mentioned, trail maintaining clubs. They could be historical society. Whatever is going on in the community, agencies as well. So, BLM, Forest Service, and the Historic Trail Alliance. Organizations in the community are partnering with the school to do things that are mutually beneficial. So collaborative means that it matters to all partners, and they all are invested in making it happen. In this example, the Appalachian Trail comes into Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, and the trail led into town, and there was just a beat up old kiosk there with some bullet holes in it and scratched up plexiglass, and you didn't know where anything was. So a group of students took on helping hikers know where to go when they got there. Here's the trail, here are the historic parts of our community, and as you can see in the bottom picture, they had a ribbon cutting with a lot of political people who all helped to take credit for this brand new beautiful kiosk, an informative kiosk. One thing that's really funny about this, I think, is if you can look closely at the pictures, you can see that the students used themselves as models for a lot of the pictures. And they had help making it look professional because they partnered with the National Park Service, who makes beautiful brochures, and helped make this one look so good. A fifth principle of place-based learning is integration, that the learning is integrated across the curriculum. It's cross-curricular, and it's integrated across the school too. So it pulls in a range of community and school staff and professional expertise. I wanted to share a quick story. There was a school that was going that decided, they saw a grant, and they saw that you could apply for a grant if you had a good science project. So they, over the summer, pulled together a bunch of students, luring them with pizza, and the students and asked them what they'd like to do. And they presented a few options. One was putting in a recycling sorting system, and the other was to try to heat the sidewalks of that were going to be rebuilt the following year along Main Street, so they wouldn't have to use so much salt on the sidewalks. And so they chose that project, and they ended up figuring out a system of capturing heat that went up through the chimneys and then circulating it under the sidewalks. And it worked so well in their sample that they ended up installing it in the entryway of the new wing of the high school. They didn't end up installing it in the sidewalks along Main Street because the project got delayed because of funding things, but they still did get it installed in the high school, which was a nice big plus. And it involved them understanding chemistry, understanding physics, understanding the political aspects of how you write to local leaders. So that was a very multidisciplinary project. And then the last aspirational principle is rigor, that none of this makes sense if it's not helping to support standards-based learning, meeting teachers' educational objectives, that it can't be an added-on fun project. It needs to be integrated into what's going on to accomplish the rigorous standards that teachers are hoping to meet. So I wanted to share one last example with you of Scheffler Creek down in Seward. And this was such an inspirational story for so many of us who got to go witness it firsthand. One of our iTrek teachers wanted to engage her fifth grade students in science in a place that was walkable to the school. So there was a creek nearby. It was locally known as Fish Ditch because it's where people fished for pink and coho salmon, and then they dumped the entrails of the cleaned out salmon in the creek, and so everyone called it Fish Ditch. And it was near enough to the school, and she thought, that's good, we'll just go walking, we'll do a little water quality testing. not, it was a very little idea. But it grew into something huge because when they got there, the students noticed that the creek smelled bad and it had lots of old bed frames and car tires, and it was had an oily scum on the top, um, and they said, "What's up with this?" And they did a little bit of digging and found out that this creek that had been famous for salmon, the numbers had been declining within the city limits, and that it actually was pretty neglected and abused. So the students advocated for doing something about it, and their teacher, sensing a teachable moment, supported them. And so they did a whole lot more testing. They got a lot of ideas, and they decided to adopt the creek. Um, and one of the things they learned was that there was a Kenai Borough ordinance that protects salmon streams from development, but it excluded stream banks inside city boundaries, so inside Seward boundaries. So they decided that they wanted to build public awareness about this, and they brought together a whole lot of different partners. They had 17 adults come representing volunteer conservation groups, government agencies, and all, who said that they never had gotten together to talk about this before, and they never would have if the kids hadn't invited them. And the results of all of that over the course of 2 years were the city stopped mowing vegetation to the edge of the banks, and they also got a $25,000 grant from U.S. Fish and Wildlife for revegetation. I just love this quote. One of the attendees, who was president of the Seward Rotary Club, told his business colleagues later, "We need to keep the health of this creek in the hands of those kids. They know what they're doing." So I think that worked really well. And one of a small but telling outcome of this whole project was that the Seward officials agreed to change references to fish dish in all city documents back to Scheffler Creek, which is what it's called everywhere else along the length of it. So that was a pretty exciting thing, and I think something that really met a lot of those aspirational principles of service learning. That it had rigor, it involved science, it had youth voice in shaping it. It was place based, it was authentic and real. It was something that and it was cross disciplinary. So really exciting. Um, these are things I've already told you about, and got the grant and convinced City. I got ahead of myself. So some of the partners who ended up being involved in the project were the Seward City Government, the Rotary Club, local landowners, Kenai Borough Assembly, and the Iditarod Historic Trail Alliance. So some kids noticing a dirty creek resulted in something really huge. Some of what the kids learned were the science things, bacteria, turbidity, depth, with all of that kind of stuff. But they also wrote letters, and they also learned about persuasive writing. And as you can see, they made an art watercolor quilt that was on display in a couple different places around town for a while. They learned how government works. They did some data collecting. They learned a lot. This one project pulled together their learning in a lot of different ways. So what I wanted to do is just talk for a minute about some of the things that Alaskan teachers are already doing in their teaching, and I'd like to show you some thinking that I've gotten from that. Let's see here. Here are some examples from Alaskan teachers of work that's going on now in support of these place-based service learning principles. We decided that integration and rigor were sort of taken for granted. Of course, you're going to do that. So we focused on grounding it in place, things that are real, things that are empowering, and things that are collaborative. And these are some of the examples that came up. I think this one needs to be yellow. Fix that. There we go. I'll give you a second to look at those. A lot of really good work. If anyone's interested, I can share this list with you later. So what I'm going to do right now is go back to PowerPoint. Um, and I wanted to just invite you to think on your own about how place-based service learning might help you to reach your teaching goals more effectively. So as you think about what you're hoping to accomplish in your classroom, how might this approach help? And obviously, you're going to modify it and tweak it and shape it to make it your own in terms of your own goals, your own place, your own students, all the things you know. But it's something interesting to reflect on and think on. I'd be happy to take questions, and I'll share my contact information. I did want to make sure to re-emphasize what I said earlier, that UAA is offering 1 credit for participation in this webinar series. And if you haven't already signed up for it, you're very welcome to. You're welcome to sign up all the way up into January, because earlier webinars will be available by video, which will count toward this credit. We also are hopeful that sometime in the future we'll be able to offer a full iCheck program again, in person, IRL, as they say, in real life. So let us know if you'd like to be notified as plans develop for that. And if you'd like to know about credit or about the full cohort or anything else related to iTrek, you can email us at itrekalaska@gmail.com. And please do be in touch with any questions you might have. This is my personal contact information if anyone has any questions. And I wanted to share a few of the upcoming webinars. They go all the way into April, but coming right up soon, we have Exploring Nature with Your Senses on November 9th, an Introduction to Questing and Questing 1 on November 18th and December 7th. Questing is a way of creating installed treasure hunts that invite people to go out and explore their local environment. And then Nature Journaling on January 11th. So I want to again thank all of the partners, the Iditarod Historic Trail Alliance, the Campbell Creek Science Center of the BLM, the Chugach Forest of the Forest Service, and the Anchorage Park Foundation for supporting this work. And I hope to see you on a future webinar. Thank you so much.